Hello. Welcome to Mr. Carroll's basement. I'm going to show you a little carpentry trick I learned over the years. It's going to save you both time and money. So, how many times have you ever sat in a chair and it was wobbly? And no matter how much you move the chair to different places, it was still wobbly. No matter how many things you shoved under one of the legs, it was still wobbly and uneven. Out of frustration, people have often decided to try to even the legs out on the bottom. Maybe they could just do a little saw at the bottom, level all the legs out. Maybe that would solve the wobbly chair. Sometimes, however, you get a little too greedy. Start taking too much off on one side, not enough on the other, and before you know it, your dining room chair becomes a floor cushion. So here's what I'm going to teach you today, with the hopes that you can use this the next time you find yourself in a wobbly chair. I am only going to show you one step of the process, but I'll explain it as I go along. So give me a second to get some of my tools, and we will try to even this leg out. Okay, so for the first set of tools, you're always going to want two basic things before you do any type of carpentry project. One, always have a pencil with you. Have a hat or something you can stick a pencil in, keep it right there for you. Second thing, and most importantly, you always wear some sort of safety glasses. Even if you wear prescription glasses like Mr. Carroll, you still want to cover those up with some nice hardware glasses because you don't want anything getting in your eyes. You want to protect your eyes. After all, it's one of our best senses. So those are the first two things you're going to need. And let me also add, don't do this without adult supervision because you will be working with a saw today. But this is a good little tip and trick to know for future projects. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to make sure that we look at what leg is the problem. Now, this is one of the chairs that I've collected for free off the side of a road. I intend to make a project out of it at some point. But what I did for purposes of lessons, I just took a little bit off this leg. You can see that all three other legs are worn, different shades of color. This is a freshly cut piece of wood right here. I took it down just a little bit lower than the rest of these legs, which caused the wobble. So what I'm going to do is show you how to even these legs out and even this leg out to make sure that all four legs are perfectly level. A lot of times when you have angled feet, like if it's a design feature of the chair, this type of tip becomes extra important because the angles are a lot different. It's not just simply just taking a straight cut right off the top. You got to make sure every single leg is even. So that's what I'm going to show you today. So first step is measuring the length of each leg, right? So we'll start from the bottommost rod right here and right here. So those are the two rods we're going to look at. And I always like to go with I like to measure down to the highest rod. So if we're looking at this bottom rung of rods here, I'm going to go with this one because this is the highest rod out of all four. So I simply just take my tape measure, which is the first tool, and I just set that on the rod, and I come up and I measure, and I try to do to the nearest inch. So it looks like it's just roughly 6 inches. So what I'm going to do is when I cut all of these legs, I'm going to make sure that my mark is 6 inches. So for the sake of this activity, I'm going to do one leg, but you're going to repeat this process for all four legs. So I'm going to go up 6 inches on this back leg and make a mark with my pencil. So I'm looking at 6 inches, and I make a little mark, one that I can see. It's always a good idea to use a pencil too. That way you can always get rid of the lead, or not lead, it's graphite now. I don't know if you can see it, but there's a little mark. Yeah, there's a little mark. You can barely see it in the video, but there's a little mark right here. it shows where I measured up. That's 6 inches from the rod. So this amount is what I'm gonna cut off. So the first step is getting a couple more tools. Now, this is a clamp. They come in all shapes and sizes. This one, it's small legs, we only need a small clamp. But as you pull the trigger, the clamp tightens. This is a good project to keep things in place. I like to call them my extra hands, you know what I mean? When I'm down here tinkering away it's by myself, sometimes I need something to, you know, grip onto, to hold a piece of wood or something. That way I'm not all sliding around, right? So the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm going to locate my mark on this leg right here. The first thing I'm gonna do is take one of these larger paint stick stirrers that are usually free at most hardwood stores. I'm gonna take one of them and I'm gonna find my mark and line it up evenly with the edge of the wood. So what I'm gonna do first is I'm gonna clamp that down so that I have a starting point. This is gonna be my guide and I'll explain what that is in a second. Okay, then I take your other rod and you do the same process, but this time I'm going to remove the clamp to show you what that would look like. But I wanted to show you step by step. What you're going to do is eventually you're going to have both rods, or both stirring sticks I should say, on opposite sides of one another. Okay, those are going to be your guides. So what I'm going to do for this, I'm going to actually release this clamp. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just make sure that I get them attached. That's the first process, is just getting them attached. And then we'll adjust as needed. As you can see, these clamps become pretty helpful, mainly because I don't have any more than 2 hands. Okay. So what I'm going to do now is I've not tightened the clamp down fully yet. I will in a second once I grab the second clamp. At this point, I just want to make sure that I have my lines even. And I'll show you a different way to test that theory in a second. Give me 1 second to do another clamp and I'll be right back. And number 4. So then what I do is I take that other clamp and I just start to apply a little bit of pressure on both sides of the stick. And what you'll notice is it'll start to tighten up, right? And what's really cool about this is once you've leveled it out, once you have the stick level with each other, once you have this completely level, it'll act as a guide, okay? So there's ways to test whether something is level or not. And I'm gonna show you one of those ways. Now for this particular activity, the thicker the wood, the better when it comes to clamps, because there's more resistance. But I'll show you how you can level out both sides. Now typically I only use 1 guide, but for the sake of this lesson I use 2 just to kind of show you a way to cut these legs off without having to use just one guide. Because if you have 2 guides, it's really easy. You can just simply go along the guide, right? But what you could do is take a level and you could level out your 2 sticks to make sure the guides are even. But for this lesson in particular, I'm just going to focus on the 1 guide, and I'm going to use this stick right here as just support, just so that it doesn't fly anywhere. So just like before, I'm making sure that this guide that I'm using right here is level, making sure that I have plenty of room to start the saw. And if you want to come around here, this is what it should look like. I'm cutting a little bit off the top right here. This upper edge is level with how I'm going to cut. And I'm just going to I'm going to level it off with a smaller level just to make sure that this is straight up and down. Last thing I want to do is cut that piece on an angle. So usually you get like a smaller type of level and you simply set it on whatever surface you're cutting. Now if you notice the bubble, if it's not directly in between those 2 black lines, your board or whatever you're measuring is not perfectly level. So how to adjust for that? Let's get a close up on the bubble. Watch what happens to the bubble when I start to move the wood. Oh, see that happen? That means that it's even more unlevel. So I need to go back the other way. And then it's just a little dance you play, you know? Oh, look at that, it's perfectly level. That bubble right in between those two black lines. All it is just a bubble inside fluid that determines what is level, straight up and down. So the next step is getting a saw for this task. Now, this is a Japanese saw. It's a type of hand saw. One of my favorite tools that I own. Not very common tool that most people have at their home. But if you look, there's a couple different types of serrated teeth on each side, and they're super, super sharp. So depending on your type of wood or what kind of finish you're doing, how much control you want with the blade, you're gonna choose the teeth. Now it kind of works just like a regular handsaw, like an old school handsaw, but the difference is it's meant to do projects like this. It's meant to create level pieces of wood. It doesn't have a nose like most saws do, and it has two different side blades that you can flip and really control the wood with. And you'll see why this is a perfect tool for something like this. So once I'm ready to cut, I come over to my area. And this is where you want to go super, super slow. Again, this is also something you're going to want to have an adult do. Since this wood is really small and thin and it's a chair leg, and I don't want there to be a whole lot of like different cut strokes through it, and I'll show you what that looks like in a second. Because it's small and I want to control it, I'm going to use the closer serrated blades. I'm not going to use something like this that would use to cut through like, you know, thicker, bigger wood. So I'm going to use these finer teeth. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to sit it flush with this piece of wood. So you'll notice that this blade then becomes level because the wood's level. And you'll want to check your level throughout the project to make sure you're not cutting incorrectly. But all you're going to do is just let that naturally sit flush right on top of the piece of wood and let it be your guide. And all you simply do is put pressure up against the piece you're cutting, and you just take your time. The slower, the better. The more fluid, the better. These blades are very, very flimsy and they like to bend. So the more control you have, the gentler you are. And it takes time to practice that touch that you need, the better. Because if I were like, you know, cranking it in there, you know, the blade's gonna bend and it's gonna jump and all that. So you just wanna take your time, okay? No rush. And you can also look at the wood. If you notice that you're starting to take some of the wood off like I am here, that's a good sign to kind of take some pressure off the blade. Let the guide do the work and let the teeth do the work. After a while, you're gonna start getting through it. Now, I've done this enough, so I'm gonna cut through it pretty quickly. Again, you're gonna practice that touch, right? You're gonna do this a couple of times. I always do dry runs before I end up. I always do dry runs just to test my. Starting to slip on me. And then I'm going to cut down just to show you what that would look like. I'm not going to go through the whole leg for this tutorial, but I'm going to chunk it out and show you what that would look like. See, he's jumping on me. He's getting a little impatient. Now you see how much was taken off with that cut. Now I did this kind of sloppily and too quickly, but if you go slow enough, you can definitely take off a nice chunk and level this out perfectly flush with whatever you're doing. Now, for sake of time, I'm not going to show you, but what I would do after this is I would take a piece of sandpaper and just lightly rub all those rough edges off to make it nice and smooth and flush. I hope you learned something. I hope you never have the unfortunate experience of sitting in a chair that is wobbly. Stay tuned. I'm going to show you some other videos. We're going to move on to plumbing next. And there's some pictures of my workbench and some of my favorite tools. See ya.